43% of young adults have reported increases in loneliness since 2020, which means they more often feel alone than they feel like they have people to do life with. Statistics show that 1 in 3 people, or close to 33% of people in the United States, experience loneliness on a regular basis. That means that many people feel alone on top of that hill, right? Or go to the top of that hill by themselves to fight the battles they face in their lives alone. And that may be how you're feeling today. Hey there, I'm Clarke, one of the pastors here at The Crossing, and if you know me, you know that I love a good high five or a handshake. I love giving high fives, I love receiving high fives and handshakes, I love everything about a good high five or a good handshake. And why do I like them? Because they're a great way to connect. Now there are different kinds of gestures, right? You've got the peace sign, you've got the okay sign, you've got thumbs up. You know, there's a lot of positive gestures, and they are great ways to connect. To me, they communicate one main thing, that we know each other and are part of a community together. Now, of course, we've all been stuck in traffic or stuck in line somewhere, and we might have said something or done something, and it might have been shown a different kind of hand signal. I'm not talking about those. In my life, there's one gesture I remember really well, and little did I know there was a powerful story brewing that would begin because of this one gesture. It was the summer before my second grade, and so I'm about 8 years old. And I was with my family at a Christian family camp in Santa Cruz, California, and one day I was walking through the camp, and one of the college students who was on camp staff was walking toward me. He was this super cool looking guy, especially to a young, wide-eyed kid like I was. He was a cool looking surfer guy, with a cool haircut, cool clothes, and he had a special presence that made a real big impression on me. Like I wanted to be like him when I grow up kind of vibes. As we were passing each other, he looked at me and he gave me just a simple nod, just one of these. And he was simply just acknowledging my presence. But to me, it was like when he gave me that nod, I imagined that cool guy was saying, "Hey, little buddy, you look like a cool kid. What's up? How are you? I want to hang out with you sometime, bro." Now, in my little head, I embellished it quite a bit what this cool guy was saying to me. And obviously, he didn't say any of that. But that's how I took that simple nod as a kid. There was power in that gesture, and for some reason, I would remember that simple yet power-packed nod for years to come. Now, 20 years later, I would end up working at that same camp. And on my first day, I was set to meet my boss, and on my way to the office to meet him, a guy walks out to the door, from the door to meet me. And as he nears me, he nods his head to say hello. And immediately it hits me. It was the guy. It was the same guy from way back. That same guy that had made an impression on me when I was a young kid years ago through that simple gesture I somehow recognized. It turned out he had been working at the camp all along ever since. He looked a little older but was still the same. And this guy, whose name was Danny, would go on to have a huge impact on my life. He would end up being a super impactful mentor and a lifelong friend to me. And I really believe God had that simple nod gesture happen to signal to me that this was a special guy, and that God would end up using to shape and mold me. And Danny would go on and become and still is the biggest influence on me. My life was drastically changed because of the time under his leadership. That first gesture was like God saying, "Hey, don't forget about this guy. I've got something special planned for you through him." And years later, he would be used in a huge way to help steer my life in the right direction. Positive gestures, especially between friends or people that are part of something together or have things in common, it reflects a bond, right? They imply one thing: community. Now, gestures are a way of saying, I know you, I care about you, and that we are part of a community together. In today's message, we learn about a gesture that was meant to communicate the importance of community, and it actually became a matter of life and death. We're in the middle of a series called Aesthetic, looking more and more like Jesus, where we are looking at not just the surface of our lives, but what is underneath. What is God doing beneath the surface of our lives to grow us and change us? So let's jump into the story for today. It's a good one. If you have a Bible nearby, I want you to turn to Exodus 17, and we'll start in verse 8. If you don't have a Bible nearby, I'd encourage you to follow on our app. It's free to download and a great way to keep notes and follow along. So, verse 8. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Now, at the start of this story, we see two groups of people. First, the Israelites, a tribe of people that were previously held captive in Egypt and have escaped and are on a journey to what's called the land of Canaan. It was also called the Promised Land, and it was the land that God was giving them so that they could experience freedom and be able to build a good life for themselves and their families. Their main leader is a man named Moses, who is also being helped by his young, strong apprentice and future leader of Israel named Joshua. So picture Star Wars movie, right? You got Luke Skywalker, good guy, leading the Jedis in all the Star Wars movies, right? A group of people trying to get to safety. And then you have the Amalekites, and they are identified throughout the Bible as a recurrent enemy of the Israelites. Their chief was Amalek, and he was known to be one of the biggest threats to Israel of all time. So if you go back to Star Wars, the Star Wars movies, picture Amalek as a big, buff Darth Vader, like a Darth Vader guy, right? Leading an army of these weirdo stormtroopers. And throughout the Old Testament, there are stories of repeated attacks from the Amalekites against Israel. So they were a huge, huge, dangerous threat to Israel. So here we are. The great tribe of Israel being led out of captivity by Moses and now Joshua, and also with Joshua, and they're on their way to the land of Canaan. A group of people on a long journey walking through the desert. It's hot. They don't know how long it's going to take. They're thirsty. They're hungry. They're super scared of this looming threat of the enemy clans that may surprise attack them at any time. And we see this happen here in verse 8. The Amalekites actually attacked the nation of Israel. And they attacked those that were slowest and weakest at the back of the tribe. So again, all of their hunger, their thirst, their weariness that they were experiencing prior to getting attacked was at an all-time high. All of that stuff is happening, and then they get attacked. They are desperate and now facing a life and death situation. So Moses, their leader, hatches a plan. So let's get back to the story in verse 9. Verse 9, Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. And tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. So as always, God had a plan. And in this case, it involved 3 steps. So first off, God sends a strong army, right? Moses sends Joshua and the other strongest men to go and fight, and they go and do so while the rest of the tribe stayed behind. They're probably waiting pretty eagerly to find out whether or not they were safe from further Amalekite attacks. And so the strongest people were sent to fight. Secondly, they needed to trust in a strong God. So a strong army is sent, and now they needed to trust in a strong God. And instead of making them wait, God wanted to remind them that He was with them. So He sets up a way to do so. Verse 9 says, "Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God." This is Moses talking. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. So Moses is to go and stand on top of the highest hill within eyesight, taking the staff of God with him. You're thinking a staff, what's the big deal of a staff? All right, so a staff looked like this, kind of heavy, but a staff carried with it a bunch of significance. It's a biblical symbol for support, and it's used frequently in Scripture. Places like where we see shepherds using a staff to protect their flocks of sheep. The the staff is a super strong symbol. So on its own, a staff was a strong symbol, like I said, but this one in particular was the staff of God. Not just Moses' staff, but the staff of God, because it had been used many times before by God in miraculous ways to protect and provide for the people. In Exodus 14, the same tribe was trapped with nowhere to go between the shore of the Red Sea and their enemies. And so God told Moses, raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea. And when he did, the waters parted so they could cross through the Red Sea to safety and escape their enemies. In Exodus 17, just before the story we're reading today, when the people had no water and were thirsty, God instructed Moses, strike the rock with your staff, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. And Moses did, and they had plenty of water to drink. You see, this was a symbol of God's presence. It was a potent reminder of what he had done for them, how he had provided for them, how he had protected them all along, and that he will continue to do so. So the Israelites see the staff of God as with Moses as he stands on top of the hill. They know God was with Moses and therefore with them. And so they undoubtedly found peace and reassurance in seeing Moses carrying that symbol of God's presence with him. They're like, okay, God is with us to protect us and provide for us. We're good. They needed to be reminded that they have a strong God with them and to trust that he was going to do what he always did. Provide and protect them. Thirdly, and this is what became a matter of life and death, they relied on a strong community. Verse 10, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. So Moses is to go and stand on top of the highest hill with an eyesight, holding the staff of God up high, along with Aaron and Hur, who were some of the tribe's highest leaders and close friends and family of Moses. So quite literally, the lives of the Israelites depended on this hand gesture. If he keeps them up, they win and they live. If he drops them, they lose, they die. So keeping this gesture going became a matter of life and death. And this is pretty heavy stuff, right? Okay, I'm actually getting tired. And I'm super strong and fit, right? Right? No? Well, maybe not. But imagine Moses, right? He's exhausted. He's hungry. He's thirsty. He's tired. He's old. There's no way he can keep his hands up for the duration of a full-on battle attack, which we will see lasted an entire day. There's no way he could do that. But he knows that if he lets his hands down, they will die. This is a matter of life and death. I'm tired, okay? So I'm going to put my hands down. And I actually want to pause here because so many of us are going through life alone. So many of us are facing battles alone. It says in Hebrews 10:25, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And this verse says, keep meeting and encouraging each other. Don't give up meeting with your people because it might be tempting to do so. And he says that because it is. Much of our world today has given up on connecting with others. And like I said, so many people are going through life alone and facing battles alone and heading away from community towards isolation. Recent studies have shown this, an increase from 27% in October of 2018 to 56% in 2020 in 50 to 80-year-olds who are feeling more lonely and isolated, which means they don't have people to talk with, share life with, celebrate with, or struggle with. 43% of young adults have reported increases in loneliness since 2020, which means they more often feel alone than they feel like they have people to do life with. Statistics show that 1 in 3 people, or close to 33% of people in the United States, experience loneliness on a regular basis. that means that many people feel alone on top of that hill, right? Or go to the top of that hill by themselves to fight the battles they face in their lives alone. And that may be how you're feeling today. So let's see what happens in our story when Moses is on top of that hill with his friends. Verse 12, when Moses' hands grew tired, they, Aaron and Hur, took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And then Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. Moses needed his friends. Otherwise, he's dead. The lives of the Israelites depended on the support of this community. But these weren't just friends just hanging out, right? There was purpose in this community. There was intention. And that's the kind of community that God wants us to experience. Have you ever heard of the third place theory? Ray Oldenburg, an American sociologist, in his book, The Great Good Place, created this term to describe places outside of the home, which most of us would consider the first place, and our workplace, the second place, where people go to converse with others and connect with a community. They are places. The third place are places where you encounter the regulars in your life, as well as make potential new connections. And sociologists will say third places, or having a place where you regularly experience community of relationships, are crucial to our well-being. These third places are popular for a reason. And they've been captured on TV shows over the years for a reason. You remember these. Yeah, that's the bar from Cheers, right? One guy at the end of the bar, he'd walk in the bar and everybody would yell, "Norm!" Right? They came to connect with his friends. It's not about the place, it's about the people there. And then you've got this coffee shop in a show, Friends, right? Friends coming to slap fives, say hi, share stories, talk about the day. And again, it's not about the place, it's about the people. The bar and Cheers, this coffee house and Friends, those were third places where people would find community. Now, these are old TV examples, but they were centered around the fun and connection and support that these people would find at these places. They were popular shows because of this. And why is that? Because they focused on something that humans instinctively know, that community is vital. It's not just a sociological truism. It's because we were created this way. It's because God built us, in fact, wired us for relationship. And He knew that this would be an important part of our life, one that would help boost and sustain our mental health and improve our quality of life. So now take the fun and connection experienced in those previous pictures and add the Bible's idea of what community is, and you have this. Yep. True community. Loving each other, caring for each other, praying for each other, supporting each other, celebrating each other. Hey, who put that in there? Yeah, even helping each other eat spicy food, right? This is where I want to be. This is how God intended for us to live. Caring for each other, celebrating, having fun, praying for, supporting each other. It's so good. I hear stories of community happening all the time at our church, especially in our small groups. Recently, one of our small group leaders had to have surgery, and she couldn't walk for weeks. And both her and her husband work. They have 4 kids. And you know, if you have kids, how hard it can be when you're at full health. Imagine not being able to walk. Their small group is their third place of community. And the small group did things like started a meal plan for them, a meal train that brought meals for them for weeks. Did things like dropping off and picking up their kids from school. There's no way that family could have made it through without their help. Thank God that community was there for them. Another story from earlier this year. Someone from our church was in a car accident, and one of his small group buddies would make the 30-minute drive to his house to see him every week while he recovered, and took him to doctor appointments, brought his family food. Right? That's incredible. Now, 30 minutes is a long way to drive to help someone. But you think this guy who was in the accident will ever forget that? No way. Thank God his community was there for him. And this is what we all need. So here's a truth I want you to think about today. If church is not a third place to you, a place where you regularly find community, then you are missing out on a key part of life that God wants for you. You see, throughout the Bible, it is clear that God intended us to live in community. And where do we best see community modeled? In and through Jesus' life. God sent us his son, Jesus, who would model this perfectly. One example is in 1 John 3:16. It says this, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." This laying down of our lives is what true community is, the ultimate picture. Being there for each other, to support each other, giving to one another. Community is something that was vital to Jesus. He had the crowds of people that he preached to and cared for and did miracles to and with. He had his group of 12 friends, the disciples, that he worked with and traveled with and did ministry with. And then he had his core group of 3, Peter, James, and John, that he was closest with. He lived in community, and he exemplified what community is by making huge sacrifices for everyone. And God got this idea started in the Old Testament stories like the one we read today. And for me in my own life, honestly, I don't know what I would do without a small group. Now, I'm newer to this church, but I don't just lead the small groups ministries. I'm also in one. And here's what it's meant for me. In a group with other couples to do life with, laughing with and crying while trying to figure life out together. I'm in a group with other men, and I'm encouraged by them. And I share the difficulties and struggles in my life, and they do the same. And we have fun and laugh together. The third places where I find community are essential to keep me on the path that God has laid out for me and to live the life he wants me to. Now, to wrap up the story we read today in verse 13. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. They won the battle, and they were saved from the Amalekites. And here's the image I want to close with today from verse 15. Moses, as a result of this victory, Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." Now that phrase, "the Lord is my banner," is an actual Hebrew name for God, Yehovah Nisi. And so think about this picture, this image of a banner at wartime. Picture the army, a soldier walking into battle towards their opposition. At the helm of this army is a soldier carrying a flag, carrying a banner, marching toward their opposition with the banner held high. And behind him is the army. That raised banner serves to announce that something significant is about to happen, that they're being led into battle. In our story today, it was God who was at the helm. It was God who was the banner that Joshua and the soldiers followed into battle and led them to victory. They went forward with confidence, knowing that God was fighting for them. And when Moses held the staff of God with his hands, he was reminding Israel of the banner that is God, who was fighting for them. And it was his friends, his community, that helped him to do so. Had they not helped, he would have dropped his hands, they would have died, the Israelites would have lost the battle. And for us, none of us are battling Amalekites, but all of us are battling something. I want us facing those battles with God as our banner, going before us, and with a loving community marching along with us. Because all of us will face some battle. And it might be a difficult relationship, it might be finances, job loss, drugs, alcohol, aimlessness. I promise you, if you try and win whatever it is that you are battling alone, you will not win the battle. You might have some short-term wins, but to experience victory over anything, it requires community. I promise. Just like Moses, who was able to hold his hands up for a little time, eventually he needed the help of others. And he had the community necessary to help him do what God asked him to do. for us to do what God is asking us to do, for us to live the life that He wants us to, the only answer to this is to live the way God has set us up to in community. And you may be sitting here listening to this, realizing that you don't have that third place where you find true community. If this is the case, I have two options for you, one at church and one at home. Firstly, the crossing can be that third place for you to find true community. Right now, this summer, we have our Alpha class, and it's been great, a great place to explore our faith with other people. And then in the fall, we kick off our small groups again, and I believe that these are the best places to find the community you need. Second thing you can do at home, lean into the friendships you have in your life. Don't just hang out with your buddies. Intentionally ask them for help when you need it. And then be ready to give help to them. Look for the opportunity to give help to them. So ask your friends for help and be ready to give help to them. Be intentional about your community. Remember this, without that community, Moses would not have made it, and then tragically the nation of Israel would not have survived. Because of the loving community that God brought to Moses, they won. With that third place of a Christ-like loving community, you can win in the same way. God bless you, my friends.